Welcome back, everybody, to the Leaders Talk Podcast, where we talk to leaders in every industry to see how they got to where they are today. And today, this is my first interview with someone outside of the sports world, Damon Morris. Damon Morris is the director of sales for Juvee, is a subsidiary CPG of 100 Thieves, and 100 Thieves is a big esports company and has phenomenal market share in the esports world. But like we know, more importantly, we're going to talk about his upcoming of becoming a leader, some of his tips on hiring people, some of the qualities that he looks for in hiring other leaders, and ultimately how you as a leader can make your vision come to life and have everybody on the same boat working towards that vision. So we got to start off with the most important question ever that you're going to be asked.
What's that?
Coke or Pepsi?
Oh man, neither.
Neither. I think this is going to be like an ongoing tradition. I think it's going to be like an ongoing thing in this podcast because I've always started off with that question, and everybody has always said neither. They never say either or. I
Yeah.
get one answer of saying Pepsi or Coke, and today I got an answer of Miller's Light, so that was a little bit different.
No. Well, I'll tell you this. I have a twin brother who works for Coke. So by way of my brother, for sure Coke all day. Now I will also say this that Coke's headquarters are in Atlanta, and I was born and raised in Atlanta. So yeah, I think I'll always pick Coke over Pepsi, but like living and breathing and working in the beverage space,
Yeah,
they're like my sworn enemy for the time being. So
yeah.
both of them.
I get it. Healthy competition, but outside of the competition, you wouldn't mind grabbing a Coke.
No, yeah. If I'm at the supermarket, I will never drink a Pepsi. I will grab Coke
Yeah.
100% of the time.
All right. So then the second most important question is candy or chocolate?
Oh man. Probably chocolate. It depends. Like I don't have a pretty big sweet tooth. I actually enjoy savory things more than sweet things, but probably chocolate.
All right, good. So now that we got the most important things out the way, now we can get to the meat, the nitty gritty. So obviously you attended West Georgia, right?
Hmm.
So you went to college, and right out of college, did you get into a sales job right out of college, or how did that work?
Yeah, I was actually pretty fortunate. So out of college, I was like bartending through college, so I was very familiar with like the food and beverage scene. A lot of my friends are waiters or waitresses at restaurants. I was fortunate enough to bartend at like a nightclub downtown. My sister, who's 6 years older than I am, actually got into wine, and she worked for a wine distributor in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So when I graduated, I naturally reaching out to your friends, networking, and my sister had put me in contact with another distributor in Atlanta that I got on board with. Um, my buddy Theo, who actually works for Tito's Vodka now, worked for the same distributor, and he was the Red Bull portfolio manager. And they had an opening. So kind of by way of like my sister's referral, and then my buddy Theo, he had worked for this distributor at the time. Like that's kind of how I got my first role in beverage with Empire Distributors in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And then from there, I kind of like fell in love with beverage. I mean, there's so many cool brands and things happening in the industry, in the beverage space in general. And you kind of pick and choose. Like, do you like beer? You like non-alcs? You like wine? Do you like spirits? And within spirits, it's like vodka, gin, rum, tequila. You
Yeah.
know, and just kind of fell into a role with Red Bull, and that's where I was. Worked for Red Bull for almost 10 years.
And what describe a little bit, what was your role at Red Bull?
So I started as the portfolio manager for the state of Georgia. So I would be in charge of like introducing our core product offerings to accounts, but also innovation, and then building our programming within those accounts. So like helping build menu items or getting point of sale placement, merchandising, things like that. When I worked specifically for Red Bull after I left the distributor, it was basically driving sales and distribution within a territory. So my first territory outside of Atlanta was South Florida. I was based in Tampa, and so I had roughly about 250 accounts that I called on throughout the year. And the main goals or KPIs were uh, driving sales and distribution, and basically visibility to our innovation that we'd bring to market. Red Bull, it was only Red Bull regular and Red Bull sugar free for the first 15, 20 years of the brand's existence. 2014, they they offered their first line extension with cranberry, blueberry, and what was it? The lime. Anyway, that was 10 years ago. But essentially, our goal was like to introduce these innovative flavors to our accounts and help bring them in and drive sales.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much our first role with Red Bull.
Yeah, and in the macro, looking back, right, on some of the, it's kind of interesting because now the role that you're getting into now with Juvee, it's a younger company, it's still starting out. You're kind of reliving those days of something new coming in. All right, and now we're trying to push to get as much market share, driving revenue and all that stuff. So reflecting back, how do you think? Because you did a good job at Red Bull, obviously. Red Bull, it is what it is. What are some of the things that you're taking from your role at Red Bull and applying it to now Juvee?
Man, I think like you learn, so it's easier to learn, I guess, professional or corporate lessons when you're under like a big umbrella like Red Bull, because they're already super credible in the space. Makes things a little bit easier when you're starting out with a brand new brand within an established category. There are, I would say it's not as easy because you're trying to basically build a proof of concept or provide a proof of concept to your accounts. Like, hey, Juvee is or can provide a functional benefit outside of like a lot of the other energy brands. I would say the core pieces of my development from Red Bull were like obviously professional selling, coaching and feedback, merchandising, the list goes on from like a sales perspective, but Red Bull really allowed me to like grow into my own as a sales individual and understand the different types of accounts that you work with, because even the people that you speak with, they all have different motives and they're all driven by different things, right? So for instance, you could own a business and be driven solely by profit, right? So that's what you want to speak to when you're selling in whatever product you're working with. And another individual could be driven by something completely different, right? So understanding a buyer's motives really helps speak to how you're building out your sales pitch. And that is really important because there's nothing more detrimental than speaking to somebody or selling them something that they care nothing about, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of psychology behind selling that people really don't think about.
Now I'm thinking about it now because obviously there was who said it? I think it was my dad or something that said you can't, like, you have to sell to someone that's ready, because if they're not ready, and you can sell them the perfect product, but if they're not ready, ultimately they're not going to buy. But now it's interesting that you bring up at your position at Red Bull that everybody had different motives. Like this mom and pops just wanted something to drive revenue. This one just wanted a name brand here. How do you kind of adjust to their motive? Do you change your method of approaching them? Do you change your method of, like, what
exactly right? So it's all a lot of homework, right? So you gotta, before you sell into any account or any individual, you have to understand who they are and what is driving that decision for what you're trying to sell. So it could be profit, could be at Red Bull, it's like we had like the 4 Ps. It was like,
so sorry to cut off the video, guys. A little interruption, but going back to like what you said. So how did you change your motive? Did you change your method of approaching them?
It's all psychology. At Red Bull, we had this thing called the 4 Ps. It was profit, price, place, or I think pleasure. And what it was is, if I'm profit driven, that's how you need to sell to me. Like, you need to talk to me about how your product's going to drive profits for my company. If it's place, maybe I only care about like having the top tier brands in my establishment, regardless of the price, right? So then you're talking about the premiumness of your product. If you're talking about pleasure, you have a lot of buyers who just want to build like a really inclusive and fun community for like or a really fun and inclusive environment for like their establishment. So if it's a bar or nightclub, they don't necessarily care about making the most money or having the coolest brands. They just want to make sure everyone's having a good time. So those are like 3 examples of really understanding who your buyer is, so you can speak to or build your pitch to those motives in an authentic way, of course. Like, you can't come off as a robot and with a side agenda and kind of dig into those. You really need to, I think authenticity lies at the core of everyone's sales pitch or everyone's successful sales pitch.
And kind of looking back, staying on the aspect of your sales? Because obviously there's no, you didn't jump into this position that you are with Juvee out of nowhere. And to be that position, it comes with a lot of trust because it's a new brand. So you need someone credible. You need someone that ultimately sees the vision and kind of going along that vision. I think a lot of times, like we talked over that, you as director of sales, you have to have a vision of where you want to see the revenue, you want to see the product, where you want to see the market share in the industry. How do you get others to buy into that vision?
Yeah, I think, well, you nailed it, right? You have to have a very clear vision for what you want to present to your community, because people now, like consumers now, super smart, right? And they do a lot of homework for what they put in their bodies. And when you're presenting a product like an energy brand that is sharing like functional benefits, people are going to call you out on your BS if you're not authentic about it. So I think the first thing you really have to do is establish what your core values are for your brand and what your brand stands for, and then really establish what consumers you're going after in an authentic way. Again, it's like, people now, especially in the esports community and online with Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, like everything is so visible. So people are being judged and products are being judged. I think probably more now than ever, right? Because we have so much access to information. If you put something out like a false claim or an untrue statement or something that's, a little, I don't know. More of the story is people will read into your brand and product motives. So I think from the jump, you really need to establish your identity from a brand and product perspectives and what your motives are for your community.
Yeah.
For us, it's like we have a little bit of a leg up because, being under the 100 Thieves umbrella, we already had a built-in community that we could speak to. And 100 Thieves had already established a credible brand tone of voice that their community could buy into from the jump. So even when we introduce new flavors, we already have that like built-in trust from our community that, oh, Juvee's, they're tested with 100 Thieves. We've tried their innovation before. This new product that they're launching, willing to bet that it's good, and I'm willing to bet that I'll try it. And then from there, you just have to meet their expectations from like, a taste and formulation standpoint. Because at the end of the day, it's got to taste good, right? Like regardless of if it gives you all the energy in the world or if it's got all the vitamins and minerals, it's got to taste good, and that's what's going to bring people back, to purchase a product time and time again. And that's what Red Bull had done so well, right? I mean, the product was great. It met the need of their consumer, and they had a really great product and brand messaging to go along with it.
Yeah, I think I have two follow-ups. One, I think is going to be actually to start off. So I think what we can take from that, right? The big bold is to be authentic out the gate with what you're selling. Believe in what you're selling, staying consistent with what you're selling. That consumers, like you said, are now smart, so they'll call you out if you say, it's not GMO or it does this and this and this, but it doesn't.
Vegan or anything like that. Yeah, you'll get called out real quick.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to say, I think this one's going to be very a juicy question for more the business leaders out there.
Yeah.
Obviously, the main goal, especially the industry that you're on, you're very e-commerce and retail, but ultimately what you want is to retain the buyers. You want to keep the buyers from keeping the consumers to keep coming back. That's the $1 million question. How do we as a brand keep consumers keep coming back?
Yeah, you gotta.
I hand that question to you.
No, it's a tough one, but I mean that's like the $1 million question, right? It's like, how do you get people into your funnel, and then how do you grow your funnel? So you've got to constantly provide value to that consumer. And if you really think about how in the economy really can have an impact on that, because right now it's like the economy is in an interesting place, and people are really being critical about like things they're buying, what they're spending money on. Certain people have more disposable income than others. That's why it's so critical to understand like what audience you're going after. And you have to think about things like the economy, disposable income, your brand position, age demographics. And it's I don't know if there's like one perfect formula, but I will say at the end of the day, you have to continue to provide value to your customer, whether that's through the functional benefits that your product provides, whether that's maybe you're paying into a charity or a platform that people buy into. Maybe you're working with influencers or creators that your community follow, and they trust those influencers and creators. There's thousands of ways that you can continue to build value for your product or your brand. It's up to everybody who's a leader or innovator to find out what that is. There's a secret sauce, and I would say the sooner that you could find that, the better. But it's at Red Bull. We had this thing as like the leaky bucket syndrome, not leaky bucket syndrome, but the leaky bucket, right? You got a bucket, you want to fill with water, or consumers. It leaks because eventually people leave your brand or try other brands. Like people wouldn't drink Juvee. Maybe they drink Juvee and G Fuel and Rockstar and Monster. How do we bring them back to our bucket, right? So those are the value props that you present to the community that bring them back to your bucket. And the goal is to have more water flowing into your bucket than water leaking out of your bucket. Water bucket analogy.
Yeah, I'm envisioning it. I'm a visual learner, so I like to, like what you say, I like to like really envision it. But I get what you're saying, like a leaking bucket thing, and where you're ultimately just trying to bring them back to you and trying to keep as many without getting rid of.
Well, think about it. I'll say this. When I was growing up, and this is like a really trivial example, but my family always bought Country Crock butter, right? It's like I have an emotional connection to Country Crock butter because that's what we used as a child. And so now I'm like more driven to purchase that butter than like Land O'Lakes or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I will always continue coming back to that one brand because that holds like a core emotional, memory for me. How do we continue to drive that with entry point consumers who are like 16, 17, 18, who are just now getting into the energy category, again, in like an authentic way or like a fun and playful way, so that we have this like emotional stamp on their lives where they're like, hey, this brand's really cool. I drank it a lot when I was 17 or 18, and I want to continue drinking it until I'm 19, 20, 21, 22, and so on, because I like the branding and packaging. I like the copy, the tone of voice, the messaging, the product ecosystem as a whole. And then once they drink the product or eat the product or consume the product or whatever it is, after 3, 4, 5 years, it's, they start trusting your brand, and then, they'll keep coming back. I think what's cool about emerging brands now is that there's so many cool brands doing well against like the larger Cokes and Pepsis of the world that there's so many new choices. It's very difficult to find those consumers who will pick Juvee time and time again because you have so many fun options for the energy beverages anyway. I think that, that's across most consumable goods like bread, yogurt. If you look at all of what's like a really trendy market like Erewhon or Whole Foods, they always carry these like really fun, cool emerging brands that you typically wouldn't see somewhere else. They're doing a really good job of capturing market share, and like everyone's fighting for that consumer, for the same consumer. So how do you differentiate what you're doing to get them to come back?
I think what I'm hearing, like the big bold is capturing share of mind. I think it was Warren Buffett said something. He was like, it's not so much market share, but share of mind. Because if you can ultimately stay in the consumer's mind and be at the forefront, like when they say, hey, I want an energy drink. And the first thing, if you could somehow program them through whatever advertising or how good it tastes or the 100 Thieves and allow them to, the first thing that comes to the head is Juvee, you have their share of mind. And you're already on top of the game in terms of capturing market share. But
you nailed it.
So now transitioning a little bit to your role as a leader, because obviously I think I'm not gonna speak for, but you can speak as a leader. You can't get it. So like your vision where you see Juvee in terms of revenue, sales, you can't do it by yourself. You ultimately have to bring people along with you to help you achieve that goal, right? Yeah. So I think the big key for anybody out there that's either looking for a job or whatever it may be, what is it that you look for when you're bringing people to be a part of your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say this. I think one of like the most proud things that I did at Red Bull was build the team that I did while I was there. We had a super engaged, high functioning team in the territory that I managed, and I was very proud of that. Something that probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And for anyone listening, being a people manager is 1,000,000% a skill set that you have to develop day in and day out. It's not something you can do overnight. There's certain people that are well equipped to become people managers, and there's certain people that aren't, and that's totally fine. Like I don't everyone for sure will not and should not become a people manager. The first thing that I look for is like empathy. Individuals who are empathetic, they have high emotional intelligence. They care about what they do. They care, not that they care about what people think about them, but they want to show up in a positive way. Attitude is by far none like the most important thing. I think back to when I was a kid and, like middle school, they had posters on the wall of like
Yeah,
10 skydivers.
the cliches.
Yeah. And it's like
Yeah,
teamwork or like,
yeah,
friendship or attitude is everything. There's nothing more true than the phrase attitude is everything, because everyone's attitude is contagious. And when you have a high functioning team, it only takes one person to like vent or complain or bring that morale down. And listen, we all have tough days and whatever else, and everyone should vent like 100%. You know, talk trash about a situation or whatever. Like, you can have a bad day, but at the end of it, like you got to come back up and say, all right, like what are the tasks we need to complete? Be self-aware, and understand that like everyone's in a positive position to do well. If you're working with a high functioning team, like I don't know, attitude and empathy, can't beat that. I will take that over someone who's a high functioning performer with a bad attitude every day. Because if you are a great people manager and you're fantastic at providing coaching and proper feedback, you can teach a skill set. You can teach someone how to sell. Teaching empathy is very difficult. So when you find somebody who has a lot of self discipline, uh, has high buy-in and high morale for what's going on in the company, the core values, but you can't beat that in an employee. That's the first thing I look for.
yeah. So definitely, and the another big bold that I'm seeing, or basically the big more of this is in terms of when you're hiring people to come on to part of your team,
Mm-hmm.
buying into that vision, it's ultimately you're looking for the things that are unteachable. Like you
Yeah.
can't really teach discipline. You can't teach. I mean, obviously you can motivate someone to be more disciplined. You can kind of, but if they don't come with the discipline, they don't come with the EQ, they don't come with the energy. I mean, there's only so much
Yeah.
that you can do, and the rest. I mean, in terms of the like the nitty gritty, the really, how do you say it?
I would say it just grit. I mean, if someone has
Yeah,
grit and maybe they're not the best at what they do, but like that'll evolve over time. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
people you learn by doing. And if you got someone who's got a lot of grit and a lot of like a really positive attitude,
Mhm.
I mean, that is a winning success. I promise you. Like, I don't know. I'll tell you this. I've hired multiple people who are far more experienced with like, okay attitude. And then I've hired people with very little experience and a super positive outlook and just super eager and really gritty. That person, you want that person to do well on your team, or you want to bring that person on your team over someone who's maybe already more experienced and kind of set in their ways. Because that will feed into the rest of the team. That positivity will feed into the rest of the team.
That's interesting. That's interesting because a lot of times I think in terms of like when you're looking for a job or you're looking to get into a good position, be a part of a team, you think that what they're looking for is like, oh, your degrees, what you have, your previous path, and you don't focus so much on the intangibles, the EQ and all that stuff.
Yeah, emotional intelligence. I mean, I don't know, man. Maybe you can teach emotional intelligence, but I've met a lot of people who are like not very self-aware, not super emotionally intelligent. They're not super compassionate. They're not looking out for other people, and that's fine. But those are the people who will develop, in my opinion, far better into people leaders.
Yeah.
Now, I will say on the flip side of that, you have individuals who are high performing,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have to be in a people management or leadership position. A lot of those individuals who are in sales roles, they're kind of like the lone wolves. Like you kind of you give them a little bit of direction, but they can execute at a high level, and you let them kind of do their thing.
Yeah.
Those employees are still very valuable on a team. It just depends on if you want them eventually, or if they want to eventually evolve into like a people leader versus someone who's just continually like executing against like their plan.
Yeah.
And I know plenty of people who don't want to be people leaders and they kind of work on their own and crush it. So
Yeah. So I think wrapping it up, I think this was a special. This was since you obviously were the first person that I've interviewed outside of the coaching, D1 athletes, all that stuff. I think it was very interesting to see your brain, to pick out your brain to see, well, I mean, the bigger things like selling, driving market share to becoming a leader and all the things above that. I think it was interesting. And there was definitely a lot of key points that hopefully you guys got something from it. I know definitely I got something from it. But now to end it, the big takeaway. What's your advice to that person that is looking to be a part of the team, right? And they don't know what it takes to be a part of that team, or that leader that is looking to drive a team, their business, or the captain of a football team that's looking to drive the thing to a state champ. That person that just in a leadership position, the captain on the boat, trying to drive everybody to that. What's your advice to that person?
Man, I would say the biggest thing that helped me as a people manager is context. So if there's a mission in front of the team, everyone has to understand the why before they can execute the how, right? We can put a game plan together all day. Do A, do B, do C, do D, do E, do F, hit the goal. But if the team's not bought in to the why, like why are we doing this? What's the outcome? How does that impact our business? What are the benefits of what we're doing? It's just gonna be another mission on the table. Like for me, it's under providing context to the team and sharing the why we're doing this really prompts up like, okay, now let's execute the how and figuring out like the strategy and all that. That's I don't know. To me, that's helped immensely with garnering buy-in and building morale for the team. And there's nothing better than having a positive buy-in and having positive morale for the team when you're working towards a singular mission. And that's how you get everybody kind of flowing and working together.
So knowing your why, that's the big
100%. I would highly recommend that all people leaders out there really understand the why behind the decisions that they're making and be transparent with your team about that. Don't gatekeep information unless like you really have to. I promise you will get more out of your team by being fully transparent with them and honest with them and not having any like sort of side agenda.
Yeah.
Than trying to, keep things from your team or whatever else. It's all about going to bat. Like my team doesn't work for me. I work for my team at the end of the day. I may be like the manager, but my job is to make their life as easy as possible so that they can do what they need to do. Yeah. And that's what every manager's mindset needs to be. Like, I'm never the boss. No one should ever be the boss. You're the people leader that's managing this team, and you do what you need to do every day for your team so that they can execute at a high level, period.
Powerful. You don't work. Yeah. People don't work for you. You work for the people.
100%.
So hopefully you guys made it to the end. And if you did, thank you so much for making it to the end. And I encourage you guys to look at the other videos. And this was an interesting one. I personally learned a lot, and hopefully you guys got something from it and are able to apply it into your role as a leader. And anything else you want to leave on?
Listen, if you follow esports, check out our channels, 100 Thieves. If you like energy drinks, check out Drink Juvee. No, other than that, I think this is fantastic. If you have any other questions, give me a shout. I'm available. Happy to help out, Jacob. You're the man. Love what you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for making it to that. And please feel free to come back for another one. Peace.